The hall was filled with faces, family, friends, colleagues, all gathered around a wooden casket draped in white lilies. The air was heavy, not only with grief, but with confusion. They celebrated a man who never seemed frail, who rarely missed a day of work, who always carried himself with an energy others admired. One by one, they took turns at the microphone. A coworker spoke of his reliability. A childhood friend recalled his laughter that could light up a room. His daughter, her voice trembling, said he was the strongest man she had ever known. Yet as each tribute ended, an unspoken question lingered over the congregation like a shadow no one could name. How could strength collapse so suddenly? There were no stories of long hospital stays. No battles with cancer. No warnings of a failing heart. To everyone who knew him, he had been fine, busy, perhaps tired sometimes, but always fine. His wife, standing by the coffin, whispered under her breath, "If only we had known." Outside, the cortege wound its way through narrow streets, mourners walking behind in silence. His smiling portrait rested on the hood of the hearse, a reminder of the man he had been only weeks before. But what no one could see in that moment was that his body had been carrying a secret for years. A secret that rarely announces itself loudly until the damage is already done. And so the question remains, what kind of illness hides in plain sight, stealing health without leaving obvious clues, only to reveal itself when it's already too late? Rewind a year earlier. His days began the same way they always had, before the alarm clock, before sunrise. He sat at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, eyes scanning reports, his phone already vibrating with messages. He had built a reputation for reliability. No deadline too tight. No task too heavy. People leaned on him because he never seemed to bend. But behind that rhythm, small shifts began to appear. They were so ordinary, so easy to dismiss, that even he didn't notice. He started keeping a water bottle at arm's length. One sip, then another and another still. In meetings, his colleagues teased him about it. "You're always thirsty." And he laughed it off. "Better than coffee," he'd say. The laughter masked the truth. He had never been this thirsty before. At home, the nights grew restless. More than once, his wife woke to find the bed empty. The hallway light flicked on, the sound of the bathroom door opening, then closing. Once a night turned to twice, then 3 times. Each trip ended the same way. Him climbing back into bed quietly, hoping she was still asleep, avoiding questions. The weight loss came next, barely noticeable at first. His belt slid 1 notch tighter. A colleague commented at lunch, "You've slimmed down. What's your secret?" He shrugged. "Stress, probably." And that was enough to end the conversation. Stress was an explanation people understood. But at home, his wife saw more than the belt notch. She saw the way his shirts hung a little looser, the way his jawline sharpened. She asked him more than once, "Are you feeling all right?" He always had the same answer. "I'm fine." Friends echoed the concern. At a gathering, one reached across the table and said, "You look tired." He smiled, brushing it aside. "Don't we all?" And so the changes slipped by, folded neatly into the story of everyday life. Long hours, stress, exhaustion. Excuses that made sense, excuses that required no urgent action. But the body doesn't give signals for no reason. Every sip of water, every trip to the bathroom, every pound lost, each was a message. A language of warning he didn't yet understand. What force could cause such ordinary habits to become so relentless? What illness reshapes the body quietly, cloaking itself as everyday fatigue? The threads were already pulling tighter, but no one could see the full picture yet. Not his wife, not even him. It was a Thursday evening, one of those nights that should have been unremarkable. He had just returned from work, loosened his tie, and gone to wash his face. His wife was in the kitchen when she heard the sound, a heavy thud, followed by silence. She rushed down the hallway, calling his name. The bathroom door was ajar, and there he was crumpled on the floor. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow, each inhale a struggle. She knelt beside him, shaking his shoulder, her voice trembling as she pleaded for him to wake. Then she noticed something strange. His breath carried a sweet, almost fruity smell, unlike anything she had known. Fear pressed down harder as she dialed emergency services. The paramedics arrived within minutes, equipment clattering as they rushed into the narrow bathroom. They checked his pulse, unrolled wires, and attached sticky pads across his chest. The monitor beeped urgently. Numbers flashed, numbers that made their expressions tighten. "We need to move him now," one of them said. They lifted him carefully onto the stretcher, his head rolling weakly to the side. His wife tried to climb into the ambulance, but they urged her to follow behind in her car. Inside the moving vehicle, oxygen hissed through a mask over his face. His body trembled, alternating between shivers and stillness. The medic tapped a finger against the monitor screen, frowning at the readings. Blood pressure unstable. Heart racing. Blood sugar alarmingly high. When the doors of the hospital swung open, a flood of light bathed the stretcher. A team was already waiting. They wheeled him through crowded hallways, past rows of patients and blinking machines. His wife hurried behind. Inside, doctors clustered, running through possibilities. Could it be poisoning? Some form of hidden infection? A sudden heart failure? They drew blood, sent samples rushing to the lab, ordered scans, and shouted commands to the nurses at his bedside. The strange fruity odor on his breath lingered in the air, raising questions none of them could ignore. His body was in crisis, but why? What hidden process could unravel so violently, turning a routine evening into a life-threatening emergency? The answers, they knew, would come from his blood. The intensive care unit was a place of constant hums and alarms, monitors blinking, ventilators sighing, nurses moving with urgency. He lay unconscious, wires and tubes tracing from his body to machines that beeped in steady rhythms, each sound a reminder of how fragile he had become. Results began pouring in. A nurse pinned the first set of labs on the board. His blood sugar levels were dangerously high, numbers not typically seen outside of textbooks. Alongside that, the acid levels in his blood were rising fast, tipping him into a dangerous state where his body itself was turning toxic. Kidney markers were climbing too, showing signs of strain, as though his organs were struggling under the weight of a hidden burden. Specialists crowded into the room. An endocrinologist studied the hormonal panels. A nephrologist scrolled through kidney scans. A cardiologist tapped the monitor where his heart rate spiked and dropped unpredictably. Each expert brought their lens, but none could frame the full picture yet. Every test opened new questions. Poison panels? Negative. Infection screens? Clear. No clear evidence of a heart attack, stroke, or seizure. And yet, his condition was deteriorating. A junior doctor, reviewing the charts, muttered under her breath, "It's like every system is failing at once." In the lab, technicians worked tirelessly. Vials of blood were labeled and rushed through machines. Slides were prepared, drops of serum stretched thin under glass. The centrifuge whirred, separating layers of liquid into coded colors. Data spilled out of computers, numbers, graphs, chemical concentrations. On the ward, doctors huddled together, pointing at results that made little sense. The blood sugar spike alone could have explained confusion or collapse, but what about the acid overload? The kidney stress? The fruity odor that clung faintly to his breath? His wife sat outside the ICU doors, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every time a doctor passed, she searched their eyes for clues, for any scrap of hope. But answers seemed locked away inside machines. Trapped in numbers, even the experts struggled to interpret. The puzzle finally began to take shape. Among the streams of lab results, one truth stood out. His body was drowning in sugar. It wasn't infection. It wasn't poison. It was diabetes. But this wasn't a new arrival. Type 2 diabetes had been with him for years, woven silently into his daily life. Every late-night trip to the bathroom, every glass of water gulped down, every unexplained drop in weight, each was a sign. And yet, like so many, he dismissed them as ordinary burdens of work, of stress, of age. Inside his body, the story was far from ordinary. His pancreas, once efficient, had been pushed past its limits. The insulin it produced could no longer move sugar into cells. The signals were broken. The doors that should have opened for glucose stayed shut. And so sugar built up, flooding his blood, starving his muscles, overloading his organs. Doctors explained it to his wife gently. He had been living with diabetes without knowing. The condition had advanced quietly, unchecked, until the crisis struck. What the family saw as a sudden collapse was, in truth, the result of years of silent progression. Type 2 diabetes is not a disease of days or weeks or even months. It is a disease of years. It thrives in the unnoticed spaces of life, waiting for the moment when the body can no longer compensate. On the screen in his hospital room, the diagnosis appeared stark and unrelenting. Diagnosis: type 2 diabetes. 3 words that explained the chaos in his blood. 3 words that answered the questions raised at his bedside. And yet, for those who loved him, those 3 words came too late. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic condition where the body either doesn't produce enough of the hormone insulin or doesn't use it effectively. Insulin's job is to act like a key, unlocking cells to let glucose in for energy. But in type 2 diabetes, the cells become resistant to this key, causing sugar to build up in the bloodstream. This buildup over time can cause serious damage to the heart, eyes, kidneys, and nerves. While genetics can play a role, lifestyle choices are a major factor. The good news is that a significant majority of cases can be prevented or managed through mindful living. Making choices like eating a balanced diet, staying physically active, and maintaining a healthy weight empowers individuals to take control of their health. Now, if type 2 diabetes could stay hidden for years, what damage had already been done? Could his body recover from the storm it had endured? What doctors feared most wasn't only the crisis in front of them. It was what had been happening silently, for a long time behind the curtain of normal life. Long before his collapse in the bathroom, diabetes had already left its fingerprints across his body. In his kidneys, a different battle was underway. These filters of life, each containing 1 million microscopic units called glomeruli, were straining to cope. For years, excess sugar forced them into overdrive, filtering more than they were built to handle. Slowly, their walls began to scar. Protein leaked into his urine, a signal his kidneys were slipping toward failure. This is diabetic nephropathy, one of the most feared complications. Then there were his nerves. The fine wires that carried sensation from his feet and hands had been quietly eroding. At first, it was a tingling he ignored, the occasional pins and needles after standing too long. But over time, numbness crept in. Even his heart had not been spared. Diabetes narrows the arteries and hardens the vessels, fueling cardiovascular disease, the #1 killer of people with diabetes. What looked like strength on the outside concealed a network of vessels silently stiffening within. And here is the harshest truth. None of this damage started the night he collapsed. It had been progressing for years. He lived with it, worked through it, and ignored its whispers, until his body finally forced him to listen. Diabetes is a growing global health concern, affecting individuals, families, and countries. According to the International Diabetes Federation, IDF Diabetes Atlas 2025, 11.1% of adults 20 to 79 years have diabetes, and over 40% are unaware they have it. Projections estimate that by 2050, 1 in 8 adults, that is approximately 853 million, will have diabetes, a 46% increase. Type 2 diabetes accounts for over 90% of diabetes cases and is influenced by socioeconomic, demographic, environmental, and genetic factors. Diabetic retinopathy and nephropathy remain 2 of the most common microvascular complications. Source: Frontiers in Endocrinology, 2021. And so, the doctors asked the unanswerable. How much of the damage could be undone? How much was permanent? And how much more was waiting, hidden in silence? The diagnosis was not the end of his story. It was the start of a new one. For the first time, he had a name for what had been silently reshaping his life. And with that name came a chance to fight back. The changes were not easy. Mornings began with a glucose meter, a small pinprick reminding him of the battle within. Numbers on the screen became the daily scorecard of his progress. He learned the language of targets, fasting blood sugar, HbA1c, post-meal readings. Each improvement, even by a few points, was a small victory. Food, once a source of comfort and convenience, now required careful thought. The rice portions shrank. Sugary drinks vanished. Vegetables and lean proteins filled the plate. It wasn't about deprivation, it was about survival. His wife joined him, preparing meals that nourished rather than harmed. At first, it felt like sacrifice. Later, it became routine. Movement turned into medicine. Evening walks became as important as any pill. Step by step, his muscles became allies, helping his body use sugar more effectively. At the gym, even modest exercise worked like an added prescription. Doctors adjusted his treatment plan: metformin, sometimes insulin, regular checkups, and eye and kidney screenings. The numbers began to shift. The chaotic peaks and dangerous lows gave way to steadier lines. His energy returned. The weight stabilized. His wife noticed fewer bathroom trips in the night. But not all damage could be reversed. His eyes now required monitoring. His nerves still reminded him with occasional tingles. The kidneys remained vulnerable. And so, his new life was not one of cure, but of constant management. A daily partnership with medicine, lifestyle, and awareness. Here is where his story meets yours. For those listening now, you do not have to wait for a collapse. You do not have to reach the ICU to learn the truth. Type 2 diabetes, though silent, is not unstoppable. Through early screening, healthier choices, and awareness, countless lives can avoid the fate that nearly claimed his. A significant majority of type 2 diabetes cases can be prevented or delayed through modifiable lifestyle changes. Studies consistently show the effectiveness of lifestyle interventions, particularly for those at high risk or with prediabetes. Early detection and effective management of type 2 diabetes can significantly reduce the risk of severe, long-term complications. For some, especially those with prediabetes, early interventions can even normalize blood sugar levels. In his story, the diagnosis became a turning point. In yours, knowledge can be the beginning of prevention. His story turned when it was almost too late. But for millions around the world, the question remains: will they recognize the signs in time, or will the silence continue? We began with a funeral, a haunting scene that felt final, irreversible. But that was not his story. It was a window into what could have been. A warning of how silently diabetes can steal a life when the signs are ignored. He was lucky. Diagnosis came in time, treatment was started, and his journey of discipline and vigilance began. Some of the damage could not be undone, but life itself was preserved. For millions of others, the ending is different. Every year, families gather not around a hospital bed of recovery, but around a casket of loss. Diabetes is called a silent killer for a reason. It whispers before it screams. Fatigue, thirst, numbness, vision that blurs. These are not inconveniences, they are alarms. His story reminds us that the funeral we saw was a metaphor, not his reality. But it is the reality of far too many. You don't need to be one of them. Get tested. Stay alert. Take action. Because the line between survival and tragedy is thinner than most imagine. Have you ever ignored thirst, fatigue, or constant urination? Drop yes or no in the comments. And share this video with someone you care about. It might save their life. If this story resonated with you, or if you believe it contains an important message that others need to hear, please consider taking a moment to support the channel and spread this critical awareness. Right arrow subscribe. Tap the red subscribe button below and hit the bell icon to ensure you never miss our future health awareness videos and deep dives into medical mysteries. Thumbs up like. Give this video a thumbs up. Your like tells YouTube this content is valuable and helps us reach more people who may be missing these vital health warnings. Link share. Knowledge saves lives. Share this video with your family, friends, and social networks to start a conversation about what it truly means to be fine. Help us turn unawareness into early diagnosis. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of the Path family.